So I like doing black and white studies because I don't have to figure out color, and understanding value first helps to create realistic form. So I chose this picture because it's got very strong lighting and shadows. I use simplified angular lines so I can define the main shapes and planes of the face. I also like adding guidelines for the shadows too, because I try not to add a lot of detail at first or the proportions get a bit wonky. Like here, the eye is too far up. What I was doing with the red lines before is seeing the construction of the main shapes in the actual reference photo, and then I apply that to my sketch later because it's easier to trace on digital. It takes a bit of practice, but I try to keep a mental note of where everything's lining up, like mental guidelines. So you can draw actual physical guidelines, but I just look at things like how the bottom of the ear is in line with the bottom of the nose. So now that I've finished the sketch, I like to move on to blocking in the midtones. Here I used a hard round brush at first, but I honestly like using a more geometric or squarish brush, and that still helps to keep things very geometric, and I can just block things in quickly. And then after I do the midtones, I like to move on to the darkest colors, like the darkest tone. So I'm doing the hair here, I'm trying to keep everything loose, and also the jacket. Also choosing a brush with like where you can control the opacity is good, so then it's easy to blend in between tones. Personally, I am still working on learning how to blend because I didn't know the smudge tool existed at the time of this video. So I'm still keeping things pretty rough, but I'm adding in all the other variations I see in the shadows on the face. I'm still using the same blocky brush. I'm not aiming for hyperrealism in this study, so instead of trying to draw all the details, I I like squint my eyes at the portrait reference and then see where the general darkest areas are. And I just want to give the impression of shadow. Because all of this painting is done underneath the sketch layer, I don't do all the details. So I usually leave that to painting on top of the sketch layer. So once I'm done with most of the base, I like to lower the opacity of the sketch layer and I continue blending a little bit more because before I was more focused on just the basic geometric shapes of the shadows. I can start selecting values in between the different areas that I blocked in, and then I just use that to blend and soften. I sped the video up here a little bit because this part's just mostly me doing the same thing, just blending and refining all the different areas. Okay, and once I've finished blending most of the rough areas on the base layer, I start painting on top a new layer above the sketch. So then I can just hide all those earlier sketchy guidelines. I recommend using a limited amount of brushes. So before I was using the geometric brush to block in all the different areas, but now I've moved on to a soft round and hard round, both opacity controlled brushes, and I can do a lot more blending. Because I'm happy with the overall look from a distance, then I start zooming in on specific areas like the eyes or nose and then refining those one at a time. Darker areas will create recesses in the form while highlights will bring out the most elevated parts. So creating a good contrast between those two will make a more convincing study. Same with hard and soft edges, because the areas with more defined lines, such as that shadow right next to the nose, makes them stand out more, while the more blended areas, like in the side of the face, makes the overall surface smoother. Now I'm just fixing proportions and adding details. I leave the highlights to last because they're the most fun part, but also they have the most impact, so I try to limit how many I use in the final drawing. And there is the finished study. I hope this helped someone. If there are any other processes or tutorials people would like me to film, I'd be happy to do so. And until then, see you next time. Happy painting.